Welcome to the panel. So first of all, I'd like to send my greetings to Carola Grauman, a good friend of mine from old times from Frankfurt, and my best wishes for her recovery first. So I'd like to introduce the panelists first. I do this very short since nearly everybody of you has got this information paper. I remember, I don't know if you really got it, but I would like to do it briefly first, and then so that we have more time for the discussions and for the several statements from the panelists. And then, so we have just rather 1 hour for our panel, and then I asked you for your statements, and then I hand it to you and open the panel for the discussion. So first of all, I'd like to introduce Kajsa Hedström. She's project manager at the Archival Film Collections from the Swedish Film Institute. Kajsa is project manager at the Archival Film Collections at the Swedish Film Institute. She's the curator of filmarkivet.se and in the editorial committee for digitization. So you know this problem and issue at first hand, and Nordic women in film. The second panelist is Norma Guevara, left to me. She's programming manager Creteil International Women's Film Festival. She was born in Cuba, and she's a programmer, translator, comedian, very nice, a long time ago, yeah, and stage director. Oh, pardon.
In the 70s.
In the 70s, yeah, it's a very, very great decade, as we all know, for film and filmmaking. So, and then Anke Hahn, to my right, she studied German studies and literature, German literature and philosophy at the FU Berlin, as did I at the Munich University long ago in the 70s and the 80s, sorry. And she's now working for the Stiftung Deutsche Kinemathek in the Department of Film Distribution, as I was informed. And she's also wrote a book on that, which is rather rare phenomenon in Germany, called Filmverleih, zwischen Filmproduktion und Kinoerlebnis. That's very nice. It was published in 2004. And he's also co-initiative of the film mediation project, What is Cinema, as I was informed. Welcome. So, and then we have an intervention. Maybe I'll do this afterwards. And this intervention is made by Belinde, Ruth, Stieve. She's actress and blogger. And let it be a little bit surprise what she does today. And then we have Beryl Richards. She's a director from the UK. She directs TV drama, comedy and short films, and she won the BAFTA Award for 3 times and RTS, a British Comedy Award, the Prix Jeunesse, and 2 international Emmy nominations for her directing. So welcome all. And so first of all, I'd like to start with my first question to Kajsa, which is Kajsa Hedström. Yeah, as I read, the Swedish Film Institute is really in gender equality politics policy a real role model, since Anna Sörner is leading this institute. And so my first question would be to you, Kajsa Hedström, would be, could you tell us something about best practices in your Nordic women's film project?
Okay. I would like to start to say that actually we started this priority with gender 10 years ago with that managing director. And we are state funded, but we are unique in Europe. We have an agreement between the state and the film business. And it's always, nowadays only for film production. And actually there it's stated that it should be 50-50 when it comes to support films. It's 50-50, but yes, but it's directors, producers, and scriptwriters, and last year we had 50-50. But of course, as everywhere else, I mean, long feature films are more men director. But then when Alexandra came, she pointed out even more the importance of gender, and actually Tuve, who passed away, as we heard last year, has started this initiative, Nordic Women in Film, inspired by a similar one on literature. But then we started as a Nordic project, but then the management changed at different film institutes, so they didn't want to continue. So now we work. The name is still Nordic Women in Film, but it's only Swedish women in film. And the aim is to point out the importance of film, actually to rewrite our film history. And if I want to talk to you from an archival perspective, I wouldn't say that, in an archive, you want to preserve everything. So I wouldn't say that you choose not to preserve films by women directors. And as for many archives, for most of them, the main part of our silent era is gone. But the first film made by the woman in Sweden, as we know, is from 1911. But it's still, it's lost. But anyway, that it's interesting is that, for example, a film from 1926 that was lost, that was found in mid-70s, and it had been lost for 50 years. We did nothing until 2006, when we started to restore it. And we had the premiere at the International Film Conference, Women on a Silent Screen, where one of the leading film critics at the biggest morning paper in Sweden said, "Why do we know nothing about this film? I mean, it is one of our masterpieces in the silent era." And I think that is, it's not in our canon of films.
How about the contemporary situation concerning let's say, strategies of digitization of any material saved in the archives? Which films are digitized now, and who's the ways of decision? What will be handled in a priority with priorities and so on?
Yeah, the Swedish Film Institute was granted 40 million Swedish crowns. That is a bit more than 4 million euros. During 5 years, digitized about 500 films, Swedish films. And in our archive, we have 2,600 feature films and 6,000 short films, Swedish films. And then we have another 15,000, but we hope that other archives will digitize them. And so, we are convinced that we will have more money after 2018. But we have to, as now we don't, so we have to make a priority. But in the paper I got from you, you said the process in Germany is very non-transparent. In Sweden, it is very transparent. We have a selection committee with representatives from different departments at the Swedish Institute. And the first 100 films were easy. Films that you couldn't neglect. Now we have made decision about 250, and now the hard work starts. But from the government, they ask us to give priority to films for children and youth, and our own management gave us the directive to give priority to women filmmakers. So then we have different other, and we have rules for everything, and we have it's if you can read Swedish, you can see the process.
My last question would be from more a curator's perspective. I do a lot of work for curating programs, short films as well as long features, as well as long full feature-length documentaries in my museum, on the cinema. So how do you plan to offer all these digitized materials. So is this maybe an underside of your website? Because I think this is still the missing link to find strategies for offering this digitized materials and handle it back to circularization and to the cinema, so for programming, reprogramming, not just only for saving it.
No. I mean,
digital tools.
Our digitization project is to preserve and to make access, and we actually started distribution for this DCPs. Yeah. I mean, so and then since we have priority to female filmmakers, we have a lot of films by female filmmakers that are in distribution, and it's also that you have to rewrite the film history. There are films that was slaughtered by critics when they were premiered in the mid-70s, and now they are reconsidered again. And that's what we do. And actually this year, we will launch this site, Nordic Women in Film, in April. At the same time, we will have a weekend at the Kinemathek, enlightening when, you know, we had very few female directors during the 40s and 50s. In the end of the 60s, beginning of 70s, and in the 80s, they were blooming. So now we'll it's not pioneers from the 60s, but, you know, it was more like they were a collective, so we will have a spotlight on them.
Thank you. Now to Norma, Guevara. The Creteil Film Festival has recognized the relevance of archiving very soon, and you collect, or the archive people collect informations on directresses and films since the early 70s, as I read. And there is a recent special agreement with the INA Institute in France. Maybe you can tell us something about that, that every VHS as well as DVDs from the festival collection, so-called the festival, what has been shown in the competition and the special sections of the festival now is digitized, or is going to be digitized, and then handed over to the National Archive and the National Library for use, not only for scientists, for scholars, but for the public. Yes, for the public. So, can you tell us something about this ongoing process in France?
So, thank you very much. I'm the programmer of the Women's Film Festival in Creteil. I'm probably the wrong person to be here because our director, Jackie Buet, is really the person that has defended all this archive and keeping records of everything that happens in Creteil for the last 38 years. Today is our press conference, so she couldn't be here. I almost started a riot at Creteil because we have absolutely no space. There's boxes all over the places, movies all over the places, etc. But I must agree that there has been a very, very big job done. In France, we're not very good at gender equality, as in other countries, but we are very good at archives. So, so we're not talking about 10 million, but 50 million euros that have been put into the archives. In France, there's 3 institutions mainly, the CNC, INA, and the National Library that are in charge of archives. We are at about 100% archives. It means every movie, every single movie that has a license to be shown in France, be it of any country, is kept. Every television program, etc. So this is a long story. This started about 30 years ago when INA started copying everything. First of all, restoring all the movies that were kept by the television and soundtracks of radio, etc. So it's a long story. And at the beginning, of course, there was also this question of what we can keep. But from the beginning, they were aiming 100%. But then, what do we do first, etc. So we went through all this process. As for Creteil, as I said, Jackie from the very beginning was very. She showed me at the beginning. She had like big pieces of cardboard where she put exactly everything, every person that came, the movie, everything. And afterwards, we very quickly we have a database of every single movie that is registered, not only shown, but registered in Creteil. So we're talking about thousands of movies. Now, we were very lucky to have had this special agreement with INA, because we had all these copies of these movies, not the support that was screened, but the support that was sent to Creteil to enter these movies. We kept a copy of every single one, and also information. And we had all these movies, and the INA or other institutions couldn't really digitalize them because we didn't have the rights. We're not the authors. We are not the legal of these movies. They were just given to us with permission to keep them in our archives. So finally, after several years of going around the idea, we found the brilliant idea of digitalizing these movies as the history of the festival. So this was really brilliant, because this was like, okay, now we can do it. And so the same thing, we started with, so we're talking about hundreds of movies at the beginning, all the movies in the competition, all in the international competition, then all the special sections, and then, well, so on and so on. The catalogs, I mean, everything. This will be really the memory of the festival, and also the memory of all these women filmmakers that sent their movies to Creteil, and many that were selected. And it's an enormous job. There's 5 people working for the last 6 years, 5-6 years, and we're counting on still 5 more years, because the problem is not only digitalizing, but it is also documenting these and also making them accessible. And we are very lucky, because the CNC, who also does this work, just to say something, at the beginning, the INA was only for television. But since they have now, all this is automatic, they have special programs and special catalogs, and we were given this opportunity. So it's a big job. And also, can I still say, also, it's not only the movies, it's everything that we do in Creteil, but it's very important, because not only is it the memory of all these filmmakers that went to the film festival, but it's also we realize that I think it's very important to know this, because, for example, a lot of women filmmakers also in their films, as the film that's shown here in Berlinale, it also gave visibility to women that were forgotten by history, you know, like women in the Algerian War or in the Second World War, or even so. It's like, you know, different layers of visibility. We, of course, nothing is perfect. For example, we realized this year, because every year we have like a special focus on a country or a region, and this year it's about giving visibility to women composers in movies. And so we're working on that. This will be our next film festival will be a special emphasis on this. And for example, we realized that when in our database, we never put the name of the composers. So every year you learn something new. You know, we tried to, okay, who are the women composers of these movies? And we realized that just because maybe in the catalog there was no space, and so that's 40 years of information that just left us. So we're trying to make up for that. So we can always, I guess, do better. We were very lucky also, and I think all the European festivals can do this. We have a special label for the UNESCO as heritage, and this is something that all the film festivals can ask for. and it's mainly thanks to this also. And I think it also, we talked about the networks. It's very important to continue to work on networks. In France, there are many. Also, what is important with INA is that they are now. These movies are shown at the National Library. They're also shown on. You can see them, access to them on internet, but also in all the French. The idea is to have them accessible in all the French libraries. Even the little libraries in cities. So this is very important too. It's not only to digitalize, but also to be able to restore it and to show these movies. So it's very important. Even if I did almost make a riot at them.
Yeah. And did you also publish the database anyhow?
We have not
just an interior database for your own use.
We have a database only for interior use. I was asked the same question yesterday. We do it. This is why it's called here Iris. We do have a database that if you, for example, if you call and you say, I would like to do something on women and work, we will, give you the whole list of all the movies that have on this. For example, 2 years ago, we had a special section on women working as cleaners, and we realized that we had 300, 400 movies just about this theme in different fictions, short movies, etc. So, but this database for the moment is not accessible to otherwise. Yeah.
Thank you. So there's much work to do, but we have role models still. It's excellent what you've described. So now to Anke, for the Kinemathek, who is currently really taking an influence inside your house. What is digitized and with what priority?
Well, the situation in Germany is a little bit different than in Sweden and in France, because we only have like 1 million euro per year from the government for 4 archives in Germany, which we have to share. So it's 250,000 euro per year for digitization, which makes in the average 10 films that can be digitized. This sounds really a small amount of films, but some of the films are really in a precarious state, so the material needs really to be restored. Or we had, for instance, in 2014, we had Ulla Stöckel's film Neun Leben hat die Katze, which is in Technicolor, and so this was really hard work to restore, and it was quite expensive. But we had a really wonderful presentation at Berlinale last year. And so we're going on with these like 10 films per year to include films by women filmmakers, because Deutsche Kinemathek hosts a big collection of films by women, especially from the years 1960 to 1990. So what happened, or the filmmakers from the first generation after the World War II. So we have a lot of films by these filmmakers. And it's really hard to decide which film we will do next. And I thank you for the example of Retrospective, because that's one of the films I really like a lot. And this is also a very precarious situation, because prints exist, but prints are very worn out. A negative exists, which is already good to know, because this also, a lot of women filmmakers don't really take care of their work and don't put their negatives and materials into archives. And that's very, very bad, because then film get lost and can't be saved for the future. So that's an appeal to all the filmmakers to take care of their work. And Retrospective is, for instance, a film which I would very much like to restore and digitize. But there are legal issues always connected. We heard already about it, that we don't always have the licenses to do things with the film, or rights are splitted all over. There are rights for DVDs, rights for screenings, non-commercial screenings, commercial screenings. So to have a digitization and to bring this film out again to cinema, to DVD, for research, you really have to get all these legal issues cleared. and the technical issues. So I hope this answered a little bit about.
Yeah, not at the whole, because my question originally was who decides what has to be digitized first, because we all know archives in Germany at least think about that in terms of material quality, material condition, and it's right at its own. I understand this quite perfect, but how about this field? How you discuss it?
Yes.
In your
Well, in general, there are two big arguments. One is a pure preservational aspect. Yes. So, like for instance, another example is Helge Sander's film Die Deutschen und ihre Männer. We have the negative, but it is affected with the vinegar syndrome. So we just have to really do something to save this film. And this already takes some of the money away. So there are preservational aspects which have to be observed. And then the decision for the other films, that is quite, that is the engagement of individuals for films, that you say this film is important. And at the moment at Deutsche Kinemathek, we have a few people in power that are really engaged with films by women filmmakers, so they have a good chance to get restored and digitized. But of course there are other films which are also important to be rediscovered, like for instance experimental films are also in a very precarious situation. Often, or 60 millimeter is a field which is very, very important, because nobody can screen 60 millimeter anymore. And so this is also an aspect to say, okay, before this film can't be shown anymore because it's on 60 millimeter, we would try to digitize that. But there is no, I would say, there is a strategy, but there is no master plan strategy in what comes first.
Pardon.
Just to add, it is also because I see Ulla Stöckel here in the audience. Of course, it has a lot also to do with personal contact and personal engagement, and we are very happy that filmmakers like Ulla Stöckel are able to help us restoring films.
Is it planned to also sort of highlight the work of female filmmakers via publishing databases that highlight these points, so identify the names? Many of my students, for example, I'm teaching now, do not know who Ulla Stöckel is, or at least Helmer Sanders Brahms or Helge Sander is, although there exists this DVD edition of Helmer Sanders Brahms, Helge Sanders films. A few years ago, it was published.
It's not available anymore.
Yeah, sold out. Yes, sold out. Great success. Okay. So, do you consider?
Well, one thing is, I think that's a little bit the task of the researchers to do something for the to pass on these information to a new generation. What we have, of course, is a database for all the films which are available, which are accessible. And of course, you can there research like synopsis of the film. But it's not a scientific database, really. But what we, of course, are trying to do is that we highlight in film by curating programs, packages which we offer cinemas and festivals. And here I'm really happy to observe that in the last years, more and more festivals also show retrospectives and are interested in repertory films, which wasn't like that like 5 or 10 years ago. So there is a much higher interest in the film heritage, not only by women. And I would wish very much that the interest for women film heritage would even increase.
Thank you. And now I'd like to hand it over to Belinde Ruth Stieve, who makes an intervention for us.
Yes, hello. I thought because we're at the Berlinale here, it would be nice to look at Berlinale under the aspect of no future without a past. So let's look back. A week ago, Berlinale started, so I'm going to look at the opening film. And I went into it and I saw on the press release, it said cast, the main cast, 5 men. And the director obviously wasn't a woman because it was a female director last year. And it wasn't a man, it were 2 men. And then I checked a bit more. It was 2 men writing the script. And the film was produced by 4 men. And obviously it was a male cinematographer. And I checked the composer as well. That was a man. So, and this film also had a narrator who was a man. And the film was called Hail Caesar, but I think it maybe should be called Hail. But that's just my opinion. Okay, can I have the first slide, please? We're going to look back in the past, save your place in film history, Berlinale and women. And you notice that the word women is blue because in my investigations, the women get the light blue and the men get the pink. So when we see the next slide, I'm going to look at the shares of women and men in the competition, Berlinale, Silver Bears and Golden Bears, and we start with a brilliant first slide. It has 100% women for the Silver Bear. Okay, this is actress, but still, we get 100%. I think this deserves an applause. Only we don't have time for it, I'm sorry. So we move on to the next, and this doesn't look so nice anymore. It's Best Directing, and in more than 50 years, it's 60 years now this year, there were only 2 women, but I put them as 1.5 because last year 2 directors, a man and a woman, got the prize. So we come to this sorry figure of 3%. But now this is for the winners of the competition, they get a Golden Bear. And normally, or in some other festivals or prizes, it's the producers that get the prize. But here it's specifically the directors come up. So I put the directors. And actually, there have been 4 women whose films won, so it's 5%, which is still not a lot, I must say. Now, we're looking back at into the past at 4 groups of films. We have the Golden Honorary Bears, which are for a lifetime achievement, so obviously this is looking in the past. We have the Berlinale Homages, and that's interesting because sometimes they were identical to people getting the Golden Honorary Bear. Sometimes they weren't. In the last years, very often it would be the same person. So they would show films of somebody who has been honored. That would be a filmmaker. It could be a director. It could be actors, they say, but obviously also actresses. Then we have the retrospectives. They would be on a topic like this year when it's 1966, or they could also be on focusing on personalities. And finally, we have the Berlinale Camera, which is an award that's given to somebody as an award for services to the Berlinale. Yes. So here we have these 4 groups, and you see it's not so bad. It's more than 5%, obviously. It's even more than 20%, and sometimes even more than 30% we have for the homages. So that's a start. So let's look. When you look at the individual ones here, we have the homages. That's honorary Golden Bears. We have the honorary Golden Bears, and you see the only women that get an honorary Golden Bear are actresses. So far, it has only been actresses. But for the men, you have directors, you have actors, and you have others that could be, like this year, it's a director of photography, or it could be a composer, or it could be a scriptwriter. So that's different. Again, we see here now here's the homage. You see the women. It's again 100% of all women that were honored in this homage, where they showed films. Obviously, in this case, with them, they were actresses. For the men, you have films by directors. And again, you have like a scriptwriter being honored, so on. So it's less directors than actors, but still, you see it. And now here, we have the retrospectives, and they focus quite strongly on films by male directors. You can certainly see this here. There are some, so you would find a retrospective on films by Yasujiro Ozu, but also for an actress, you would see films with Marlene Dietrich. And so you see the distribution. And finally, we have the Berlinale Camera. Again, you see it's 2/3 men and only 1/3 women. But there you see We see directors. For the first time, we see 2 female directors, but that's strange because they were 2 women that had won already prizes for their films, for best films. So I don't know if after a time, when you're a woman, you will get this Berlinale camera. I don't quite get this. And the producer was also honored. And I would like to show you the other section. And you see this is 5 people. So one was a long-serving Berlinale secretary. It was somebody to do with food because they have this culinary cinema. And people, and what else? The founder of the Kinemathek in Jerusalem, Leah van Leer. Were there any retrospectives specifically about men? No. Were there any retrospectives specifically about women? Yes, there were 2. There were the Dream Girls, film stars of the 50s, and the City Girls, images of women in silent films. So I would, for the future, like to suggest, how about some retrospective about directing girls? But, as I would like to say, please say about directing women. Okay, thank you very much. Thank you.
Belinde, I believe there's a lot to do to make the situation better. Thank you. And also for your humorous intervention. Thank you so lot. It gives me great fun. And now to Beryl, our last panelist. Beryl, I would, Beryl Richards. So I would like to ask you, you have made a study on the influence of critics, film critics, on the canon and the canon of films, the film canon, the canonic films in history. So, according to your opinion, what can film critiques really do, maybe also to improve the situation of this kind of asymmetry in the film canon between women's directors and men directors, or that also concerns maybe script writing? For example, the script writing processes.
Right. Okay. The study. I should just put that slightly in context. What the study is, if that's okay.
Yes, please.
So I'm chair of Directors UK, which is the professional organisation for film and television directors, and I also run the gender equality campaign for women directors at Directors UK. We're about to publish a study on film, and which has gone a very in-depth study, which looks at all sorts of aspects feeding into women directors' careers, and it's 2,500 films over 10 years that have been analysed, and the reasons why women don't sort of break through in depth. Now, that slide up there is sort of one of the main sort of things that we're finding, and I'm sure it's probably quite familiar because there's that sort of pattern is followed in other European countries. But it's sort of within that, there is a small section about critics. The study itself isn't really released until Cannes, I'm afraid. But what we did, I can talk a little bit about it. What we did find was that that in fact, though it is thought that we didn't find that it was a significant thing in terms of critics. They did seem to equally sort of look at men and women's films. The difference was that where there were women film critics, they sort of more actively sought out women's films to review, if you like. But we didn't find that the coverage was biased one way or another. We sort of concluded it was relatively neutral, which is perhaps different to some of the studies in America. I mean, in a way, the study itself, the broader sort of finding of it is that women are filtered out at every level as they go through their careers, and it's very difficult. It's twice as difficult to then go and make a second, third, and fourth film, despite the fact that it starts off as 50% in the universities and 50% coming into the industry, and at each stage of progression, that's knocked back all the time.
And when this study will be published, you mentioned it.
It will be out just before
complex
Cannes, sort of beginning of May.
Okay.
Yeah, and so this is the sort of, if you can read that, that gives the main sort of as women go through the sort of, it goes low like a funnel. sort of goes lower and lower and lower.
Okay, yeah, we see it there.
Yeah.
on the
Which I
screen.
can speak to if you want me to.
I would like to add just one question and then hand it over to the general discussion. Can you say something about the general situation of the digitizing process in archives in Great Britain?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not an expert in that,
Yes,
I'm
I know,
afraid,
yeah.
just so you know. I know that the situation is better than here, from what I've been told.
Yeah.
I think one of the reasons is that there are two sort of film historians who are women and who within the BFI who have more awareness, I think, of this issue. We also have a BFI player which is publicly accessible, which seems to be doing extremely well. You probably know more about this than me, to be honest. You probably should answer that. But I mean, that certainly seems to be picked up by the public. I mean, I know that they run sort of seasons of, for instance, right now there's a thing about London, and I know a lot of people who live in London like me are going into that archive, and it seems to be very successful how they're promoting it. Is that your view?
Asking me? No.
Well, you're nodding.
I was, I like this BFI player very much, and I would love to have something like that for our archive. But of course, you need to digitize all this material. And my question would be, how many films? Do you know how many films are included in this player? And
I mean, I know it's quite a large archive, and certainly it's not all on there by any means. But and they've been discussing sort of formats that it should be on and how long it might last, and there was a lot of those discussions. So I think they're probably in a similar place to you in terms of, you know, deciding what should go forward. But I think we're in a slightly better situation in terms of there is more awareness, I think, of that, women and, you know, sort of ethnic minorities in that archive, yeah.
So thank you very much, Beryl, and thank you very much to all the panelists. I would say the discussion is open.
Hi. I have something to say that I'm super adamant about, and it's this. Hang on. Okay. All right. We're talking about Save Your Place in Film History. Basically, about 10% of all people that write in Wikipedia are female, okay? 10%, 90% are male. I just want to let that sink in. And it's totally open access. You can just go and start writing. And I would say that's something we can all change. Everybody who sits in this room can start doing something about it, okay? We're not only talking about film history, we're talking about history in general. It's becoming really, really important. Everybody looks something up on Wikipedia, and if you're not there, you don't exist, okay? Yeah, you see I'm adamant about it. Okay, now I'm not asking you guys to start writing, because writing is a horrible process, takes time, and it's not easy. What I would ask everybody in this room to do is to think about whether you can create an event during your film festival in your institution where you teach women how to write in Wikipedia. We did that thing this Monday with Renate. Renate, stimm auf. No, she's not here anyway. And it's a start, and if you want to do it, I have Wikipedia business cards with a guy you can get in contact with, and I would totally ask you to do it, because Wikipedia is only 15 years old now. If this doesn't change, that only 10% of people in Wikipedia who write there, who contribute there, basically, we'll never be able to like pick that slack up. Okay, and there's no glass ceiling, it's open access, you just need to get your thing together and start doing it. We're going to be here, come and see us, and if you're interested, okay? And also have Gummibärchen here.
Thank you very much. Now, anyone else? Still time.
Yeah. Hi, my name is Andrea. I run the Norma Human Rights Film Festival, but my question is about something else. I've been asked to curate film classics for a local art house cinema, and they can only play DCPs by now. They've done away with all the... No, they have 135 mil in one cinema, but not two for archival copies. So my question is, do you see... it's almost like a backlash, I feel, that films have been restored by women, and they have been made available on 35 mil in the past. Those could be screened somewhere. But with DCPs, and Deutsche Kinemathek is an absolute exception, I find it very difficult to get access to those films on DCP. What we did, we asked all the distributors in Germany to send us a list of classics. First of all, it's very interesting what they consider classics. It's everything that's been produced before 2010. On this entire list, there was one woman. It's Jane Campion on the piano. There's nothing before. There's not one single film by anyone made outside of Europe or North America. And most of them are Anglo-American men. So how can we address the situation? Because by now, if it comes to the actual presentation of the films, we're in a situation where most cinemas, at least in Germany, are not even able to play 35, or let alone 16 mil, to get more DCPs in distribution. I know everybody hates kind of these DCPs, everybody wants 35 mil, but nobody can play them anymore.
As you said, maybe, I don't know if it's an exception, but of course, whenever we do a digitization or a restoration, the DCP is one of the main objects or targets, the end of a digitization, because of course we want the films to be presented and screened in the public. That's well, at least my main interest, to bring those films again in cinemas. But then again, you need to raise the interest in cinema programmers in these classics, which are a little bit aside the main road. So I think that's a big problem to raise the interest for these films. And of course, they should be available on DCP. They should also be available on DVD or Blu-ray, or even on online platforms like BFI Player. So different forms of dissemination should come out of the digitization. But of course, it's always a question also of money.
So we learned that the French people are collecting everything, and the archive is 100% full, and that Sweden has a priority for women, which is really super interesting. You know, now we just tackled this issue a little bit, that in Germany it's not a very clear situation, and not an open debate on what should be digitalized or what should be restored. I would like to raise a question, where are the gates, you know? What can an institution like, for instance, the Women's Film Festival, who has been screening films of women directors from all periods for all the years, we always screen silent films and everything, you know, from 18-something till 2016. So what can I do as a representative of this festival and as a curator if I want to be part of this discussion? Is there any, where are the gates? Because I didn't quite understand this. Or is there any initiative that could be started to make it more, more democratic? Because I heard just one more thing, you know, yesterday in a debate, you know, that when it was asked, you know, which films are selected, they said we take nice films, you know, good films. And so maybe it would be funny to get into the discussion what a good film is, you know, and define that a little bit further. So, yeah.
The situation in Germany is always called intransparent, but of course it is also to a part due to the federal system. We don't have a central archive, but we have 4 archives at least. Potsdam, again, is also an archive, has an archive. So we have this situation which is due to the federal system. And this is a democratic system which we have to deal with. But to answer your question, of course, archives also respond to demands and requests. We also do digitizations if there are like producers wanting footage. And then we say, okay, don't only take this 2 seconds footage, but digitize the whole film and you don't have to pay any archival fees. So this is one way for all of you, if there's the demand for it, if there's the request, of course, this heightens the awareness and puts also some pressure on archives and institutions to take into account more films by women. I hope this answers your question.
Hello, my name is Julia Bierhold, like the one who holds the beer, from the German Actors Guild, the equivalent to SAG in the States, although much, much younger. We just turned 10. And I have two questions. First, since we work a lot in copyright issues, I would like to know how you solve this problem. I think I didn't really get it. How you solve this thing that we get paid for our work as authors, let's say, Urheber, Leistungsschutzberechtigte, I don't know the English words. So maybe this is too specific to discuss here in public, but maybe we could have a little chat later, if it's possible.
No, but I can answer. We don't have the distribution. It's a different process. We don't have the distribution rights of the movies at all. Neither does INA. The movies always will belong to the right holders. It's just a copy. A copy, and that will be accessible for working, etc. And but the right holders are always the right holders. They just in France there is an obligation to hand in a copy of any movie that has a license, be it a French movie or a foreign movie. And what we didn't talk about a little bit also, because we're talking like a little bit like on European basis, we, even though the situation isn't good, we are very privileged because, for example, when you work on African women's films made by women, many countries don't even have a copy. So it's very important also that we work on this issue of keeping copies of these different cinemas. But the rights of the movies always belong to the right holders.
Yeah, this I understood, but so if I use a copy, let's say in a library in, I don't know, Orléans, then do I have to pay for the use of the copy, or can I get a free access?
Normally, for the moment, it's a free access for professionals. Okay. For professionals, students, and pretty soon it's going to be in all libraries, so it will be, but it's not copies that you can distribute. We don't have copies that you can distribute. It's just that when you inscribe a movie in Creteil, you sign a paper saying that we will be able to keep a copy for the archives, and this since the beginning. So we do, but we don't have the right of except for some movies where we have, because this has happened, filmmakers that say, I can't keep the copy. And so they gave us the rights of the movie. But if not, we don't have at all these rights. It's not the same situation. It's only copies as an archive to be consulted. But this is very important because it's the whole history of women making movies that is accessible. I just wanted to say something that I forgot to say, and Jackie had asked me, because she said that she wanted to point out that for Creteil, the first women filmmakers that were very important as a whole were the German women filmmakers, and people like Elma Sanders-Brahms, Margaret van Trotha, Ulrich Oettinger, Ulga Stuck, Jutta Burger, and many other. So this we are very thankful to all these German filmmakers that are very important in the history of women filmmakers, and yes, it's important to keep a trace.
Thank you very much. So my second question comes much more from my heart than from my head, and it's just to spread the piece of information that we, as the Screen Actors Guild, are working on gender equality in film, and we are here three women who belong to this group. And I would like to invite European colleagues who are working on this issue to join us afterwards for a chat, because it would be very important for us to connect with you and share our work and learn from you. So thank you for joining us, and have an Apfelschorle with us afterwards.
Sounds nice, thank you. So just one last question, please, Annette.
Annette Brauch, I'm co-editor of Frauen in Film and a film professor at the University of Paderborn. And I hope I'm not suggesting a lost cause or a hopeless case if I want to, at least as food for thought, put in one suggestion that we consider the issue of technology as one that should not be one-dimensional, subscribing to the logics of industry, capital, whatever, and jump on the bandwagon of digitization unconditionally, and consider, particularly if we think about questions of access, that many films, particularly those by women, will never get digitized. So should we not also put our efforts into access in terms of have them available for projection in whatever venue there is, and keep 35mm projectors and projection possibilities alive, such as 60mm also. At my university, I have established a projection facility for 16 and 35mm. So that's one way of trying to counter, and maybe we should understand ourselves as a little bit of a counterforce also. Definitely digital is the future, but maybe there's a little minor track which will still be 35mm, and that's the future of keeping things alive that otherwise would definitely disappear.
That will be my position too. But we mustn't forget that some cinemas in this country, as concerns some kommunale kinos and the film museums, of course, have this opportunity to project and screen 35mm prints. You know, I'm happy to have some in my house too.
That, of course, we are keeping all the analog prints, and in my distribution, 90% of the films are still analog, but each week, 160mm print is destroyed in some projection. And so this is really, that's the reality. And so we have to really take care,
So thank you very much to all the panelists, ladies, and thanks for your questions. And now, good afternoon, whether it may be at some reception desks or buffets or at the Berlinale. Thank you very much.